Thank you so much, and apologies again for being unable to put my camera on.
Okay, thank you, and no worries. We were able to see you before the blackening. Well, thank you for inviting me. I was very happy to get a glimpse on the PLUS projects. It's actually the second glimpse in a short period, because 2 weeks ago I was also invited to discuss a part of the project that was mainly about gendered issues on the platform economy in Paris. So it was a first discovery, and I'm very glad to be able to continue to know more about your research. I was able to read a bit more than what was presented, so maybe I will ask questions about unsaid things today. I was very, I thought that was, I was able to see very interesting and rich data, and I'm glad actually to recognize some aspects that we've been able to see also in the French research. So I think it's good for research cumulativity. Maybe one common question first on the scope, maybe, and the concept of platform economy, because in both presentations, I think maybe the term platform economy has not shown perfect efficiency, maybe, because in the first presentation, Stefania, you said that the workforce is very diverse. And so I was wondering if it could be interesting to have smaller, maybe not concepts, but to divide platform economy into various sectors or areas, depending on if you order work or goods, and if you have, because obviously an Uber driver is very different from an Airbnb host, and there are similarities, I'm sure, that make the concept of platform economy worthy, but maybe it needs to be cut into smaller sectors or ideas. And in the second presentation, maybe also a limit of the term. Melissa, you said that platform economy researchers have been focusing on the main one and the biggest and the more capitalists, but maybe, yes, platform capitalism is very different from other areas, and maybe is the platform thing the most important, and is, well, to summarize, is platform economy a good concept, or a good well, is the scope right? And now a few questions on both the presentations. In the first one, so I will be talking from what I read also. I was yes, maybe just a first question about the presentation. The second question you raised, why do workers work for platforms? I'm convinced it's an interesting question that leads to very interesting results. But still, I'm always astonished that this question will not be asked, or at least not asked in the same way for industry workers. The whole sociology of labor during the 19th and 20th century was maybe mostly focused on industry, and why do people go and work into a factory was not maybe a totally relevant question. And I'm wondering if we are a bit influenced by a discourse that highlights the craving for entrepreneurship and the people who want to work in a certain way. So I don't know. I don't know if it's if you think there's something here to discuss. And a few questions about the report. Maybe to focus on the benefits of the comparison, because it's really fascinating that you have all this data on all these different cities. And for just a few questions, because I can't ask you too many, but for example, in the different cities you were able to investigate, what was the taxi sector like before Uber? I mean, is the disruption created by Uber the same in the different countries and cities? Has Uber modified sectors that were functioning alike, or was the pre-existing sector very different? The regulations, the employment status, was it very different, or was it closely the same? And what consequences do this difference make? Also, for the comparison, what is I don't expect you, of course, to give me the rates in every country, but what is the impact of the pre-existing rate of independent contracting in each country? What difference does it make to maybe the relation workers have to social security, or their pre-existing projections for their professional path? What were they expecting? What are they actually facing? I think you certainly have a lot to say on the on this aspect of comparison. And another line of comparison is between genders. You said it in your presentation. That's one aspect that it interests you, and it's for the best, obviously. And I will ask a question that was raised at two weeks ago at the event I mentioned earlier. How can you understand the weak and delayed creation of platform that organize feminine work, feminine activities, or allegedly feminine activities? Why does well, maybe it's not the case in every country, but in France, the platforms like Helpling or Wikasa developed really a few years after Uber and Deliveroo. And I think there are several hypotheses, including the historical background linking women to the rise of wage labor and the fact that independent contracting is mostly concerns mostly men. Also, maybe that women are supposed to be more stable, to bring a more stable income to the household. I don't know, maybe. And maybe the specificity of women's activities and of the care work. When you hire a nanny, maybe parents want someone they know and they trust. They don't want someone different every day. So is platform economy adjusted or relevant to care labor? So that would be my questions. And for the second presentation, so I will relate to what I know of cooperatives in France, but I didn't directly work on them. So I will refer mostly to colleagues' works. In the definition you mentioned of the cooperatives, I think it was slide 4, nothing is said about who owns the structure or the capital, and I think it's a difference from the whole history of cooperativism that really is supposed to be an alternative to capitalism and to the who owns the capital. So I don't know if it's not that important, or, well, I don't know, but I had this question in mind. I was wondering, I saw, I've heard several presentations about cooperativism, but also on wage portage. And some of them were implying that wage portage was a quite costly and incomplete way to access rights for workers. And they also mentioned that we could see these phenomenons are as privatization and individualizations of social protection. So I was wondering if that's an analysis grid that seems relevant to you. Regarding the emergence of platform cooperatives, of different alternative platforms, do you have results on the conditions that allow cooperatives to be created in different sectors? Because for instance, in France, cooperatives have been created much more in the meal delivery industry than in the transportation industry. And I think it's because the cost structure is different, the market structure is different, many important reasons. But do you see common points that explain why cooperatives can emerge in certain sectors and not in others? And one maybe last question is because in France, Smart, during I don't know how long, maybe a few years, was able to host, to rally les intermittents du spectacle, the casual workers in the arts and entertainment industry. But then it was forbidden a couple of years ago. And I was wondering if the same happened in other countries, and in the end, if cooperatives like Smart were really able to rally platform workers. Because I remember a few events where there were representatives from Smart, and they were clear about the fact that it would not be a good structure for Uber drivers and for delivery workers. So who is currently joining these cooperatives, and do you see a future for the platform workers in this direction? I hope I was not too long. I'm sorry, I didn't check the time when I started, but I will stop now.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you so much for your differentiated question that will help us provide more information of our findings and in a more differential way, also pointing to the historical comparison and the European level. Before we begin to answer this and to avoid a Q&A situation, I would actually like to ask Alexander Fischer to provide his comments, and then maybe the team from Barcelona can begin to respond, and then the team from Berlin, and then I'd very much like to open the floor as well to the audience. So whoever wants, feels free to open their cameras. I think it would be really, really nice. I cannot do it, but but I would if I could. Thank you, Alexander Fischer, for being here. It's a great honor to have you, and I look forward to your comments. Thank you.
So hello from Berlin. Thank you very much for the invitation and the interesting research results. The Berlin Senate started to discuss the future of work in a dialogue process already in 2016 with a focus on fair working conditions, because platform work in Berlin is on the rise, and not only since the pandemic. Digital platform models make up an essential part of the Berlin startup landscape, and many large service platforms have their headquarters here. So in Berlin, we face major challenges when it comes to ensuring good working conditions. A lot of people say we are the capital of precarious work, especially when it comes to new rapidly evolving forms of work. So we are always interested in other cities' experiences, and I'm very much looking forward to the discussions. So first, let me give you a short overview of our activities. And first, I have to say employment law is federal law in Germany, so the federal government sets the rules. Just recently, the Berlin Senate Department for Labor became a supporter of the Fair Work project, a project that rates platforms according to principles of decent work. Fair Work highlights best and worst labor practices in the platform economy. And this is a concrete way to show that fair working conditions are actually possible and to promote them. In 2020, our Senate department hosted a European conference on platform labor and developed a policy paper that focused on the role of cities. And the most important demands were, for example, clarity about employment status or a transparency requirements and opportunities for platform workers to communicate with each other. And from our point of view, these aspects are quite well covered by the directive proposed by the European Commission. The directive pursues the supportable goal of improving the working conditions of persons performing platform work and thus creating standards for quality platform work. And the proposed measures close existing protection gaps of particular importance, such as the correct determination of the employment status of persons performing platform work. So in our view, common rules for the European Unions will contribute to more legal certainty and thus promote the opportunities for good work in the platform economy and sustainable growth of the platform economy in the European Union. And I mean sustainable growth. So while platform work is a transnational phenomenon, cities are confronted with the concrete problems that platform work causes and some of the regulatory needs. An important basis for effective regulatory measures is a solid database. And this is currently lacking. From an urban perspective, the data situation needs to improve. Another important aspect that's also mentioned in the PLUS policy paper is counseling service on site. In Berlin, we have the so-called BEMA, Berlin's counseling offer for migration and decent work, that supports migrant workers claiming their employment and social rights. BEMA offers individual advice, workshops, and trainings on labor and social rights. And BEMA's advisory services are not exclusively, but also aimed at platform workers. The second last point I would like to highlight is ensuring representation and co-determination. Berlin, for example, is planning to establish a focal public prosecutor's office against union busting. A very big problem in Berlin. The last point I want to highlight is enforcement and control of labor protection laws, especially health or environmental protection of workers. So you have the special unit in Berlin, it's the so-called Lagetzi, was cut by a half in the austerity years. And since 2016, we started a reconstruction process. We are rehiring, and we have now a new federal law, the Workers' Protection Control Law. So we plan to a multiplication of controls and a doubling of control officers until 2026. So for us in Berlin, it's clear behind platforms are the people who provide the services. Protecting these people needs to take priority, over the interests, and this means good working conditions, a fair wage, and social as well as legal insurance, for example, in the case of illness, accidents, or old age. And we are approaching the topic from different angles, and I look forward to hearing more of your insights in the discussion that follows. At last, I'm very sorry to say that I have to leave after my address soon, because another task of our department is to prepare for shelter for a lot of refugees, possibly a lot of refugees from Ukraine, and I have to join a meeting with our special unit for refugee shelter.
Alexander Fischer, thank you so much. Coming from the Berlin Institute of Migration Studies, we are quite aware of your situation, and we believe that this is most urgent. So thank you so much, despite this really, really sad day, that you have been able to join us. We will take your suggestions and all the measures that you have taken into account, and also provide you with a summary of the responses if you have to leave now. So again, thank you so much for being here. In any case,
thank you.
Yeah, we will definitely be in touch. Thank you so much. And
thank you very much.
Very good luck for building the shelters.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Then I would like to pass on at this point to Melissa and Ricard for all the questions that have been raised, and maybe also respond to some of the interesting measures that have been taken in Berlin in relation to what you may know from Barcelona, or things that you think Berlin could be learning from Barcelona, or vice versa. Please.
Sure. Thank you, Manuela. And thank you, Sarah. And I think he had already left, right? For your response. Okay, so I'm just going to give a brief the answer to some of the questions, and maybe later on Ricard wants to complement it, with some of them. I'm also very glad to say that Sarah from SMART is here, so she will also help me out, and she will give also some more detailed info about regarding your questions. Yeah, first, the first question was about the platform economy concept and its adequacy. So basically, there are like a bunch of concepts that are trying to define what is the platform economy, such as collaborative economy, gig economy, etc. Within Dimon's research group, we say that the platform economy is composed of different models. Some models are the platform capitalist models that we call the unicorn models, basically. And we also find other types of models, such as the platform cooperativism and open commons. Basically, we say that some of these models are collaborative economy and other models are not. So they are not based in what you were basically saying about the horizontal cooperation, governance, etc. These concepts need a much richer definition that doesn't mislead the discourse and doesn't lead to ambiguities. But that's like our point of view, or the way we define the concept. So regarding the platform cooperativism, I'm also highly aware that platform cooperativism is kind of the concept leaving behind part of the historical the story of cooperativism in general, by including other types of models, such as social businesses, right? In this regard, there are like certain models which, yes, they are sharing the governance of the organization, while others are not. We are more in favor of the ones who are sharing the governance, and it's deeply important that the governance is shared. But I just did like the presentation quite fast because we had like 10 minutes. But yeah, so the part of the governance is like the baseline. You were also asking about the case of, so I'm just gonna give part of this answer also to Ricard about the if he wants to complement this also, or the part of the different alternative, the conditions for the growth of the platform economy and the cooperative economy. But I'm gonna try to answer part of the question regarding the SMART. Yeah, so basically, yeah, in terms of the weight portage and the privatization and the individualization of social protection, SMART was born with the idea of showing that an alternative, that giving social protection to self-employed workers is possible. Yes, it's true that certain stakeholders are trying to use this system to privatize social protection, but that's not the interest of SMART. So yes, it's a highly important topic. It also connects with the second question regarding the basically if it's adequate for platform workers, since the idea is not to privatize the system. That's the answer basically was not. In the case of SMART, they realized that certain platform workers were joining SMART, and they basically decided that this is not good because they should be employees, which is way different of giving social protection to self-employed workers, which is the aim of SMART. So basically showing that a system of social protection for self-employed workers is possible. But of course, Sarah will be able to give you a more detailed answer. I'm just gonna hand the word to Ricard, so he can just complement my answer.
Just to the first part of the response about the role of governance in a previous research performed by Demons in the analysis of what it means a platform economy project and what type of relations are really important to take into account in this configuration as a holistic vision. We analyze 6 types of dimensions: the governance, the economic model, the technological and data policies, and finally the responsible society of the project, and also the impact that they causes. From this result of this analysis, the conclusion, or the main conclusion, it was that the governance is a key point regarding to the type of platform we are considering. Thus, disconnect with the tradition of the cooperatives that includes the governance as a key point of the way that the organization works. In this type of analysis, which we have discovered, that is the type of organizations that transit from an analogic perspective, to say in these words, to a digital perspective. They incorporate as the first way to transit to digitalization the governance of the organization as a way to improve the way that they take decisions and we manage the governance of the organization. Which is in this case the way that of the governance is a key point of the model of a platform COP is really in this way, and the key role of the governance. Just to add this.
I could start for the Berlin team. Thank you very much for your question, Sarah.
Moritz,
yeah.
Do you mind if Sarah, because she told me that maybe she wants to give like a short
please,
answer,
Sarah,
also in case of SMART. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to answer some of the questions that have been put on SMART. So just for a little precision, it's since last fall that in France we do not operate for intermittent workers anymore. It was an administrative decision. But it hasn't had any impact on the fact that in other countries we do continue to also work with artists. Legislations are very different across Europe, especially regarding these workers. And in the fact, as Melissa said, for us, platform workers, especially those of Deliveroo and Uber, because as you mentioned, there are very different types of platforms. But in those cases, particularly, there's clearly is subordination. And for us, the platforms should have hire directly the workers. But we saw that it wasn't the case, and we had some members that were also working for for Deliveroo. And therefore, it was a decision to find solution in the emergency. In fact, in Belgium, we started to have these workers in 2015, and the courts only made a decision a few weeks ago, and they're working on a law only now. So we can see that the legislative time is very long, and what we tried to do is to create some more rights for these workers actually in an experiment, and it was what we were able to do. We provided them with solutions where they were paid by the hour, for minimum 3 consecutive hours, access to insurances and so on. So we think it was an interesting experiment that showed that it's possible for these platforms also to operate with such type of contractual relations, but we also always said that it was these platforms that should be the employer. And in fact, as to individualization, as Melissa said, what we were created because we saw that there were a lot of these workers who were atomized in the market. And our idea was to, on the contrary, to recollectivize rights and recollectivize production tools. So it's not the promotion of these forms of work that we do. It's more how to protect those who are like this on the market. So how do we recollectivize rights for autonomous workers, both with the salaried status, which allows them to contribute to the state social security system, but also to get back to access to rights. But on the other hand, also to develop our own mutualized services and rights within the cooperative. So it's quite the opposite of promoting the individualization. It's more about recollectivizing for these workers that are emerging in the service economy. I just wanted to specify these aspects. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Thank you. Thanks for interrupting. Yeah, I wanted to address the first sort of comment by Sarah, because I'm really intrigued on the question of platform economy, because like in general, I do agree that with this term, there's very different sort of companies lumped together and there are problems. But I think especially if we speak about platform labor, I think the question of diversity is not necessarily one in between these platforms, but in the workforces of the platforms, because those platforms, even in one city, have very diverse workforces. I used to work for Deliveroo in Berlin, and there were like many students, but also full-time workers, migrants from South America and work on holiday visa, tech workers in between jobs, and so on and so on. And I think this is something we can observe in many platforms, that they have very different workforces and that they bring together very different people from very different backgrounds and in different situations. And I think this is something that is generally new about digital platforms, because through algorithmic management and their apps, they need very little training, and they can have a high fluctuation. They have multilingual apps, so they can include workers from different language backgrounds and so on. And I think this is also a difference to, say, a factory, that we have a very coordinated, highly controlled, highly organized labor process, but that doesn't need the sort of spatial, subjective, social homogenization that a factory needs. So workers can be controlled throughout the city and can be let into the platform and expelled from the platform very quickly. And I think this is a really interesting and important point about platform labor, and something that is really, really new here, while we can see the long history of, say, self-employment and piece wages, especially if you look at migratized and female workforces and so on. But I think this is a really important question and finding also. The second point I quickly wanted to answer is Uber. I think it is really interesting to see, or there's of course a lot of differences between the cities, but one thing that we have seen quite often is that the taxi sector is quite regulated as compared to, say, the food delivery sector. So that Uber is actually starting in cities and trying to really disrupt these sectors by, for example, not registering as taxi company, but as a sort of rental service or so on. And so there's a really, really aggressive attempt to undermine the regulation in the sector. And I think we can see this also by the sort of very militant reaction of taxi drivers in the traditional sector in, say, London or Paris, that there's a sort of a level of regulation that we don't have in other sectors. And of course, this is not true for all cities, but I'd say it's true for many cities, and the high level of regulation, and also like the maybe often also high level of workers' organization in the taxi sector is something quite particular that forces Uber to also then adapt to local situations and, for example, not work with its classical gig economy model, as I've described it with Berlin and Lisbon, but also but more sort of have a more flexible subcontracting model adapting to local situations and regulations. This is, I think that's all from me, just two of your many very interesting points, and maybe Stefania wants to add something.
Yeah, I can comment briefly on this, and maybe try to be brief so that we have a little bit more time for the discussion. I found very interesting, Sarah, thank you, all your questions, and in particular the one on gender and how it comes out. I mean, many issues in a platform labor and the research that we did. Maybe I will talk a bit briefly about helping and Airbnb, because the platforms have been working more on this, and of course all the other researchers from who are participating can also complement on this. Well, first of all, I think it's interesting because we found out that taking also Airbnb in our sample platforms, we saw that there are many different activities in the labor which is actually connected to the platform, even though it is not necessarily considered as a platform labor, as a labor platform in itself. An interesting example, for instance, was for me one interview that we did here in Berlin, in which a couple was hosting one room, was renting one room on Airbnb, and there was the division of activities within the couple, like the woman would be in charge of doing things like preparing the beds and this kind of things. And there was some kind of narrative of saying, okay, I like to, to find the right bed sheets, and, this kind of, it was interesting to me because it somehow reproduced family relationships, also in relationship with the platform. However, this is not necessarily always the case. So we also found, for instance, one talking about one helping male worker talking about how actually the most important thing is not cleaning when you go to a place with helping, but rather establishing a communication with the family, with the people that you're cleaning for. So we saw that the emotional labor communication skills are very important in platform labor, in particular for these platforms, but they do not necessarily mobilize femininity or masculinity in a way that we maybe might expect to also think this also just relates to very larger societal tendencies, actually. But I think that platforms somehow redistribute gendered skills. So I think that's interesting, but of course something that we should delve more deeply into. I think I would just answer these very briefly, and maybe someone else from the audience wants to add on this, or if you have other questions, so we can open up the discussion. Thank you again very much for the questions.
Thank you so much, all of you, Melissa, Ricard, Moritz, and Stefania, for your very brief and great answers. I'd like to open the discussion to the audience. We already do have one question in the chat that I'm happy to read out, or Bernd, you would like to ask yourself, maybe?
Yeah, thank you very much for the discussion. It just struck me when Mr. Fischer was explaining the question of multi-level governments, how labor laws are federal and or even affected by the European level. Yet these platforms seem to thrive on the urban just as much as the digitalization is a necessary condition for their existence, apparently. So I would just like to ask, what are the policy discussions that try to pinpoint not the specific digital about the platforms? I think you have, or this has been amply discussed, but what are the policy discussions that point specifically to the urban and to take into consideration this, the urban condition of platform labor? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernd, for this question. Who would like to go first?
Maybe I can just start, but
Yes,
surely
wonderful.
other ones will say something else. Well, I mean, it's a huge question. It's a very interesting question, of course. I will just say what comes to my mind as first, I think. First of all, of course, we know that platforms need big cities. They need the concentration of people, they need the concentration of data. Also, they need the concentration of infrastructure. There are several topics discussed in urban governance, in relation to urban governance for platforms. One important one is that of data and how data can be somehow negotiated between platforms and cities in order to have a more fair relationship. Also, and for us, of course, there is also for us in the PLUS research the issue of not only of data, but also the impact on urban processes is very important. Of course, it depends on platforms. If you take Airbnb, it's very clear, there is a clear relationship now between, that was analyzed many times and verified many times in research, between the rise of rent prices and of property prices and the arrival of Airbnb. This is, of course, something that concerns very much municipalities and researchers, of course, and also activists, although it seems that like the landscape of, for instance, of resistance or organization around this is still a bit fragmented, while you have cities like Barcelona, in which there is a high level of organization somehow in the field of urban like housing and Airbnb. In other situations, it's a bit more difficult to have this, and regulation has taken place like almost everywhere, but it seems that it doesn't really work very well, because to the point that Airbnb won't keep the data, control is basically quite impossible to achieve, at least until now. This is one issue I wanted to stress, but there are many others. I don't know, maybe someone else want to also add on this.
Thank you, Stefania, for this insight from mainly Berlin. Maybe Melissa or Ricard, could you give your own impression on this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, one aspect that connects with this question, that also tries to like basically give a yes as an answer to the question, is that part of Demons, there's also another project called Sharing Cities Action. Basically, that project tries to give more power to cities in terms of policy making. So basically, just to make like this claim that cities are the main are suffering the main impacts of the platform economy, and therefore they should have more power and not the states in this regard. So basically, there, as part of this project in 2018 and 19, maybe now I'm confusing the dates, we contributed to a declaration of the platform economy principles, sharing city principles. I'm just gonna send it through the chat, but basically it was an alliance of several cities around the world, 40 cities, just stating that the platform economy should be a place for better working conditions, of urban governance, etc. That, yeah, I think it may be of your interest.
Okay, thank you so much. Ricard, would you like to add anything?
No, Melissa has explained it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, both of you. Maurizio, you do have a question, please.
No, I just wanted to add a point on this, on the role of cities and the issue of the governance, as we will have another seminar, the next one, 7th, that will deal with this topic. As my impression generally is that, you know, platform economy, also in the analysis, there are and in formulation of the policies, there are two general claims, or myths, sometimes we can say. The first is that you know, the condition of employee will solve anything, and the second, that a European legislation will solve all the problems. Regarding this, the first point, also Moritz said something, you know, that the condition of employee could clarify some points, but will not be immediately or by itself the solution for all the problems that platform workers encounter. On the other side, I think that one of the ideas emerging from the project is that also only a top-down approach. So with the formulation of common rules at European level without a grounded governance will not solve the problem anyway, especially because platforms are very resilient to adapt to different backgrounds, to find different ways to operate, and especially because there are different perspectives also at local level between different stakeholders. For example, we saw what happened in Spain with which was the reaction to the famous rider law. So it has been very debated and I would say not very welcomed by workers. And also, that's my opinion, because the legislative process were very top-down with a few interaction at local level, and especially the cities are the most grounded. You know, the urban the platforms operate, especially this kind of platforms we investigated operates at local level. And so cities have to be involved in a way. And in our project, we tried also to outline some possibilities to empower local administrations, both in terms of policies and in terms of funds, to also be effective in terms of social protections and regulations. And we will try also to give more inputs on this in the next seminar.
Thank you, Maurizio. This is has been very helpful to actually wrap up this beautiful workshop. I'd like to thank Melissa and Ricard from Barcelona, and very much Moritz and Stefania from Berlin. Also Sarah Abdelnour for your tough questions, and Alexander Fischer, who can't be here with us anymore due to the Ukrainian-Russian crisis, or whatever we could call it. There will be many names for this. Many thanks for being here. Here is an outlook to the coming seminars on March 7 and March 14, which have already been mentioned by Maurizio, and everyone by the audience, and of course all the Plus members are very warmly welcome to join us for the next 2 coming workshops. Thank you so much for being here and for your attention, and I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Many thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.